If you're in debt and losing hope, soft, steady breath. A voice that feels like it's sitting across from you, not above you. There are moments in life when the numbers feel heavier than the nights, when every bill becomes a silent accusation, every overdue notice a reminder that you're slipping through the cracks. Debt isn't just financial, it becomes emotional. It follows you into your sleep, sits beside you at breakfast, shadows your every thought like an unwelcome ghost. If you're listening to this right now, maybe you've reached that silent point where fear becomes familiar, where your heartbeat quickens at the sound of your phone buzzing, where you avoid checking your bank account because the truth feels like a storm you're not ready to face. Debt doesn't just drain your money, it drains your hope. You begin questioning yourself in ways you never did before. Where did I go wrong? Why can't I get ahead? What if I never escape this? And in the quiet places of your mind, another question lingers. What if I'm failing at life? Walter Riso once wrote, asterisk, you're not what happens to you. You're what you choose to become after it happens. Asterisk, but when debt grips your life, choice feels like a luxury. You feel trapped, cornered, powerless, like your future has already been written by the mistakes or circumstances of your past. But listen closely. Debt is not a definition. It's a condition, temporary, painful, but temporary. Yet the world doesn't treat it that way, does it? The world equates money with worth, success with wealth, dignity with balance sheets. So when you struggle financially, it's not just your wallet that feels empty, it's your identity. You start shrinking, avoiding invitations, avoiding opportunities, avoiding conversations about money because the shame feels louder than your voice. But here's the part nobody tells you. Debt doesn't make you irresponsible. Debt doesn't make you weak. Debt doesn't make you unworthy. Sometimes debt comes from survival, from trying to keep your family afloat, from medical emergencies, from education, from life happening faster than your resources. And sometimes it comes from choices you regret. But regret is not a sentence. It's a lesson waiting to be learned. What breaks you is not the debt itself. It's the isolation that comes with it. You feel like you're carrying a weight you can't talk about. Like hope is a luxury for other people. People who don't wake up wondering how they'll make it to next month or next week. But let me tell you something with absolute clarity. You are not alone. You are not defeated. And your story is not over. Debt is a chapter, not the book. But right now, it feels like the whole story because you're living inside the hardest part. The irony is that debt tricks you into believing you have no choices, just as you are standing at the edge of the greatest turning point of your life. It convinces you that things will always be this way, that the struggle is permanent. But if struggle were permanent, growth wouldn't be possible. And you are growing in ways you don't even see yet. Because here's the truth. Debt is not just a burden. It's a catalyst, a brutal teacher, a wake-up call that forces you to confront parts of yourself you've ignored for years. Your relationship with fear, your relationship with discipline, your relationship with avoidance, with shame, with resilience. Debt exposes you, but in that exposure lies a chance to rebuild yourself from the ground up, this time with intention. You may think you're drowning, but what if this is a part of the story where you learn to breathe underwater? Stay with me, because the next part will reveal something you might not believe yet. That the very situation crushing you right now may become the force that transforms you. And that transformation, though unimaginable today, begins with a single realization. You are bigger than any number. You are stronger than any debt. And your future is not dictated by your past. This is not the end. This is the breaking point, where everything painful becomes everything possible. The tone deepens, still gentle, but sharper now. This is where awareness begins, where the fog starts to thin. There comes a moment in the journey through debt when fear stops screaming and begins whispering. Not because it's gone, but because you've grown strong enough to hear something else beneath it. A clearer voice, a braver voice, your own. At first, you barely recognize it. It's quiet, almost hesitant, like a spark trying to survive the wind. But it says something powerful. This cannot be where my story ends. Debt tries to make you believe you've lost control. But the truth is far more complex and far more empowering. Somewhere in the middle of all this chaos, There's a part of you waking up, a part that is tired of fearing the mailbox, tired of avoiding the mirror, tired of feeling like life is happening to you. That part wants change, not just survival. Walter Riso once wrote, asterisk, reality is not what you fear, it's what you face. Asterisk, and slowly, painfully, courage begins to replace avoidance. You start to look at the numbers, not because they're easy, but because the truth is lighter than the anxiety of not knowing. For the first time, you allow yourself to see the whole picture, not to drown in it, but to reclaim your power. But here's the twist most people don't understand. Debt doesn't just drain your bank account. It drains your sense of possibility. It whispers that you cannot dream. You cannot hope. You cannot imagine a better life because you don't deserve it. Yet imagine this. What if debt is not a punishment, but a pause? A forced moment of reflection, pushing you to examine the patterns that led you here. Not to shame you, but to save you. Because debt, for all its cruelty, reveals truths you would have never seen otherwise. It shows you where you overspent, emotionally, financially, energetically. It shows you who supported you, and who disappeared the moment you struggled. It shows you what you fear most, and what you're capable of surviving. You begin to realize something profound. Debt didn't break you. It woke you. And with that awakening comes anger, not the destructive kind, but the liberating kind. The kind of anger that says, I refuse to stay stuck. I refuse to live like this forever. This is the pivot, the emotional turning point, the moment when hopelessness becomes hunger for change. You start educating yourself, not because you suddenly love numbers, but because knowledge is oxygen after years of suffocation. You begin to see options you didn't recognize before. Payment plans, consolidation, restructuring, side income, boundaries, discipline, courage. None of it is easy, but compared to the weight of constant fear, effort feels like freedom. And maybe for the first time, you understand that debt is not a moral failure. It's a circumstance, one that millions of people face, often silently. You're not irresponsible. You're human. You made choices you thought were right. You survived things you didn't plan for. You kept going even when the ground beneath you crumbled. If that isn't resilience, what is? But here's where the real shift happens. You stop saying, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what is this trying to teach me? And the lesson begins to unfold. Discipline, patience, vision, self-control, self-compassion, and above all, the courage to start again no matter how many times life tries to knock you down. Debt may hold your money, but it does not hold your destiny, because something inside you has changed. You're no longer desperate. You're determined. You're no longer in free fall. You're learning to land, and the fear that once controlled you begins to lose its grip. This is not the part of the story where everything gets easier. This is the part where you get stronger. You're building muscles you can't see yet, emotional, mental, financial. And those muscles will carry you into a future that debt has no power to deny you. Stay with me, because in part 3, you will discover something extraordinary, that the very situation that once crushed you is about to become the reason you rise higher than you ever imagined. The voice becomes firmer now, steadier, grounded. This is a phase where the listener begins reclaiming power, step by step, breath by breath. There's a moment, subtle, almost invisible, when you stop drowning and start swimming. You may not notice it at first. There's no sudden revelation, no cinematic music swelling in the background. It happens in the smallest decisions. Choosing to open a bill instead of avoiding it. Saying no to something you can't afford. Writing a plan instead of spiraling in fear. These aren't small victories. They're the foundations of your comeback. Debt tried to convince you that you were powerless. But power doesn't return all at once. It returns in fragments, in discipline, in awareness, in the courage to face what once terrified you. Walter Riso said, asterisk, you can't change what you don't confront. Asterisk, and now, for the first time in a long time, you're confronting your situation with eyes wide open, not with shame, not with panic, but with clarity. And clarity, my friend, is the beginning of liberation. You start to see patterns, financial emotional, psychological, and something inside you clicks. This isn't just about money. This is about identity. This is about finally choosing the kind of life you want, instead of the one you've been surviving. You begin to understand that every dollar has a story of impulse or intention, fear or freedom, escape or responsibility. And you start rewriting those stories, slowly, consistently, with a newfound respect for the future you're building. But the most dramatic shift? Your relationship with shame changes. You realize that shame kept you stuck more than the debt ever did. Shame silenced you, isolated you, convinced you that you were alone. And now, as you release that shame, you also release the chains that held your potential hostage. Debt stops being a monster in the dark. It becomes a math problem, big, frustrating, but solvable. And for the first time, you feel a strange new sensation. Hope. Not naive hope, disciplined hope. The kind of hope that wakes up early, that sacrifices comfort, that chooses long-term peace over short-term pleasure. This hope doesn't lie to you. It tells you, asterisk, it will be hard, but it will be worth it. Asterisk. And suddenly, the future feels possible again. You make changes, serious ones. You tighten your spending. You build a plan. You find extra income. You cut what drains you. You track what you once ignored. And with every step, you feel lighter. Not because your debt is gone, but because your mindset is changing faster than your numbers. And that's the real breakthrough. Your mind frees itself before your bank account does. Then something even more powerful happens. You start believing in yourself again. The way you used before the setbacks, before the bills piled up, before the world made you feel small. You realize you're not behind. You're rebuilding. You're not ruined. You're reawakening. You're not failing. You're recalibrating. And the very thing that once crushed you becomes a fire, pushing you to grow in ways you never knew you needed. Debt forces you to ask hard questions. What kind of life do I want? What habits are hurting me? Who supports me and who drains me? Why do I spend the way I do? What am I trying to avoid? Who am I becoming? These aren't financial questions. They're emotional ones. And answering them is how you rise. Debt is no longer the villain. It becomes a catalyst, the turning point, the awakening. And then comes a twist, the one you never expected. You realize that the strongest version of you was born in your lowest chapter. Your discipline grows. Your confidence returns. Your vision expands. Your resilience becomes unshakable. And with every step forward, your debt loses the power it once had over your emotions, your identity, your sense of worth. You stop saying, asterisk, I'm drowning, asterisk, and you start saying, asterisk, I'm rebuilding, asterisk. And that's when you begin to understand the truth. You may still owe money, but you no longer owe your life to fear. Stay with me, because in part 4, we reach the transformation, the moment when you don't just manage your debt. You rise above it, rewrite your story, and take back your future with both hands. The tone opens warm and triumphant, not loud but deeply steady. This is the voice of someone who has crossed the desert and now sees the horizon. There comes a moment in your journey where the weight begins to lift, not because everything is perfect, but because you are different. Your steps are more intentional. Your thoughts are less chaotic. Your heart is no longer at war with itself. Debt hasn't disappeared yet, but the fear has, and that changes everything. For the first time in a long time, you start to feel something that once felt impossible. Control. You've gone from drowning, treading water, swimming with purpose, and now, steering the ship. And here's the powerful truth Walter Riso would whisper into your soul. Asterisk, the past explains you, but it does not define you. What defines you is what you choose to do now. Asterisk, and now, you are choosing differently. You're making decisions with clarity instead of panic. You're spending with intention instead of impulse. You're moving with vision instead of fear. And as the fog clears, you begin to see what debt never wanted you to notice. Your future is bigger than your balance sheet. You start saying no more freely, not out of deprivation, but out of self-respect. You choose what matters, and you stop feeding what drains you. You build habits that honor your peace. You track progress, not perfection. And then something extraordinary happens. The shame evaporates. The same story you once had becomes a story you share with pride. Not because it's easy, but because it shows your strength. Because people who rebuild from the bottom carry a courage the world cannot buy. Debt has forced you to evolve into a version of yourself you didn't even know existed. Disciplined, strategic, focused, patient, resilient, unbreakable. And now, you begin experiencing the emotional reward of your transformation. You look at a bill and think, I can handle this. You check your account and feel, I'm getting somewhere. You make a payment and whisper, one step closer. These are not minor victories. They are the building blocks of your comeback. And perhaps the greatest twist of all is this. The same situation that once crushed you has now become your motivation. Debt taught you humility. It taught you self-control. It taught you resilience under pressure. It taught you how to reinvent yourself. It taught you that your worth is not measured in dollars, but in decisions. It made you wiser, sharper, more aware, less reckless, more intentional, more powerful. And as the numbers decline, slowly, steadily, something else rises at the exact same pace. Your confidence. You are no longer the person who avoided their bank statements. You are no longer the person who panicked at every unknown expense. You are no longer the person who felt unworthy of dreaming. You are someone new, someone forged in the fire of responsibility and reborn in the light of self-belief. And when that final debt disappears, whether it's next month or years from now, you will stand taller not because you're financially free, but because you are emotionally free. You'll realize the real victory wasn't paying off debt. The real victory was becoming the kind of person who could. The strength you gain will stay with you forever. The mindset you built will influence every decision from now on. The wisdom you earn will protect you for the rest of your life. Debt didn't defeat you. It trained you. And now, with clarity in your mind and fire in your spirit, you begin the real chapter, the chapter where you build wealth, not just money, where you build stability, not just survival, where you build a life aligned with your values, not your fears. So here is your final truth. You didn't just overcome debt. You overcame the version of yourself who believed you couldn't. And that is the greatest comeback any human can achieve. Take a breath. Look at how far you've come. You didn't just pay numbers. You rewrote your destiny. This is your victory. This is your rise. This is your new beginning.